Hello, I'm Elvin Wilson, prep manager at the original Pancake House in South Carolina. I'm back with another video. Yeah, it's 1992 and it's Saturday morning, and we've arrived at the original Pancake House. We get there about 5:30, and we're setting up to open the restaurant up by 7 a.m. So we're getting everything ready, putting the bacon in the oven. The bacon that we have at the original Pancake House, we pre-bake it in the oven to bake off a lot of the fat before frying it on the grill. It's a really, really good bacon. It's a really, really good bacon. It's a old smokehouse, sugar cured, and it's really, really good. Yeah. So we put them in pans with strainers at the bottom, and we put it in the oven, and we bake it off a little bit. We bake some of the fat off of the bacon before actually taking it out of the grease and frying it on the stove. The bacon at the original Pancake House in South Carolina is some of the best bacon that money can buy. It really, really is. It's really, really good bacon. It's a good quality cut. And my favorite bacon when I was growing up was sizzling, and this this is far better than any bacon I've ever tasted at home. Uh, when I first started working at the original Pancake House and I tasted the bacon there, it's the best bacon, in my opinion, that money can buy. Uh, so we're setting everything up. We got the bacon in the oven. We're starting our grits, oatmeal, getting everything set up. As we get closer to the opening hour, we'll start to saute off apples. We use Granny Smith apples when we make our apple pancakes. And we'll saute them off on the stove before adding our German batter. It's the batter we use when we make our apple pancakes and Dutch babies. The German batter at the original Pancake House is very unique. It's exclusive. I've never seen anything like it anywhere. And it's a really, really good batter, and we keep it fresh. We keep it fresh. And a lot of times when I'm prepping that batter at the original Pancake House, I try to make enough just to last 24 hours. So I'll make small batches. Even now in 2026, I make small batches just to keep the batter fresh. I want that batter as fresh as possible. And any batter that does age past 24 hours, we use it, but I don't like to. I don't like to. I feel some type of way about it, when I'm using a batter. Like German batter past the 24-hour mark. I don't like that. We only saute off a few apples just to get started, because we don't want too many sitting in the oven. We don't want too many sitting in the holding oven, because you only got a couple of hours to get the maximum quality that you can get out of the apple pancake. So a lot of the apples we anticipate on selling them within 3 hours, and if we don't sell them within 3 hours, we'll either hopefully float them off and we getting on the weight, we'll start to float them off, or if it's really, really slow, we probably won't be able to use them. But we're setting everything up, cracking out 36 eggs in the bowl, as I mentioned before in the previous video, and getting those ready. Some of the 36 is already cracked from the previous day, but we try to stay one day ahead on that, because a lot of times you get busy, and you're busy when you use your 36 eggs that you cracked the previous day. Let's say you do 8 bowls for the weekend, and you go through that, and you're starting to go into the bowls that you prep for the following day. That's when you know you're doing good business, and we like that. We like that. But yeah, the opening at the original Pancake House, getting there early in the morning, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun for me, because I used to like opening at the original Pancake House. A lot of times the cooks there for, that are open, the ones that are there earliest usually are done by a certain time at the end of the day, depending on how busy it gets. They'll be done by a certain time of the day. So if that cook got there at 5:30, chances are about 1:30, he's getting off for the day. And then the cooks that got there about 7:30, would finish up. So there would be maybe 2 cooks from the hours of 1:30 to 3 o'clock, depending on how busy it was. If it was real busy, then those early morning cooks would hang around. They would stick around. But if it wasn't that busy, they start cutting. But yeah, we're setting up the line and getting it ready. The restaurant opens at 7 a.m. And the first thing we were always trained and taught was to look for an opportunity to make customers happy. And that was one of the things that was, you know, instilled in my mind during the training process when I worked at the Regional Pancake House. You always want to keep an eye on the dining room. You don't want to just be sitting on the line and ignoring what's going on out front. You know, a real good, solid cook, and this is the way I was trained from James Jordan, who got his training from Portland. You always want to have your eye in the dining room, seeing what's going on out there. You know, kind of anticipating, you know, what might be happening. Because if you're not paying attention, you know, and you just focus on what's going on back here, and you're not really looking, you know, when you had the opportunity to look out there, you're not looking, and you're toying around doing other things, you know, you can miss an opportunity. You know, and I'll never forget that. You know, so I used to always do that. I'd be watching, you know, and then we'd see a group of people coming in, like maybe a party of 5 or a party of 10. You know, a server would announce it, say something. You know what I mean? That's an opportunity, you know, for us. At that point, you know what I mean, we get on the weight at the Original Pancake House. We'll start to float the apples and the Dutch babies. You know, we'll start to put those in the oven and get those pre-cooking. Go ahead and get them started because they take like 20 minutes to cook, you know what I mean? So if we know we got a party coming back, and chances are they may or may not order the apple pancake or the Dutch baby, but you already got one going. You know, and that's always great. And what makes it fun is when they actually order it, the apple pancake or the Dutch baby, and you've already got the cooking process halfway started. You know, that gives you an incentive to want to get the rest of the check out so that you can sell the apple pancake and everything can go out all at one time. You know, these are the things we strive for at the Original Pancake House. Timing, especially when you're working in the kitchen. The cooks must carefully coordinate timing in the kitchen. And your ultimate goal is for all the food to come up at one time. Although there are times where that may not happen. And the servers need to understand that, as well as the manager. So when the manager is being trained, they need to understand that, yes, although you want all the food and the cooks should be focused on getting all the food up for that party at one time, it's not always going to work out that way. It's not always going to work out that way. And you can't really get mad or fault the cooks if you're really, really busy and all that food does not go up at one time. What you need to be focused on is making sure you're following the rules. And what are the rules? The rules is that food that's in the window is not allowed to sit in the window and under the heat lamp. Everything must be served prompt. You know, everything must be served the time it is cooked, and none of the food should be allowed to sit under the heat lamp. Unless you know for a fact that everything is coming up, and if everything is coming up, great, that's wonderful, because that's what the cooks are trying to do anyway. They want everything to come up at one time, but everything's not going to always come up at one time. You know, does it make a cook feel good when everything is up at one time and that whole check is done and everything goes out at one time? Of course. That makes the cook feel good. It makes the server feel good. The management team, everything is great. But you can't always expect it to happen that way. And when you do that, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. You know, because if you've ever gotten any training, any proper training at the Original Pancake House, you'll know that that is not going to always happen. The food is not going to always come up on time. You know, so when those apples are ready, those Dutch babies are ready, those omelets are ready, you know, and food starts to come up, that food needs to be taken to the table. I want to say immediately. That food needs to go out immediately, you know, and it's not allowed to sit in the window. And that's a challenge that a lot of Original Pancake houses they struggle with, because it's lack of training. That's all. It's lack of understanding. And the servers get to the point where they're comfortable with not running their food until all of it is up in the window. You know, they'll just stand there, you know, and they'll be like, oh, you know, I'm not gonna take anything until everything is up. You know what I mean? Someone may even walk off. You know, over half the food might be up there, and they were just trained that way. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's just lack of understanding. And you don't want to get away from following the principles and the rules when it comes to coordination in the kitchen, because it's not going to always come out all at one time. Meanwhile, you got your customers that are sitting out there, and you're blaming the cooks or being upset with the cooks, or the cooks might be upset with the servers because they're not doing their part of blah, 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 and these things happen. But then again, the customer is the customers are the one who's suffering, because if I come in to a restaurant to eat, if my food is up, I want my food straight off the grill, straight off the stove. Some customers, they really, really do like it when all their food comes at one time. They may want to say a prayer or something like that, but you don't want to get the customer spoiled thinking that all their food is going to come to the table at one time. Working at the original Pancake House, you need to kind of communicate with the customer, letting them know when this food comes up, we're going to bring it to you. We want you to have it hot. We want it to be fresh for you, just like I would want it for myself. In a nice way, you need to let the customer know that it's not guaranteed that everything's going to come up all at one time. So if there's something like an appetizer or something you may want to order, for that reason, we offer certain things. We have fruit bowls, we have Dutch babies, we have apple pancakes, things of that nature that you can order, and we can get them out to you ahead of time so that you have something to snack on while you're waiting on the rest of your food to come out. Or, if the table's waiting too long, back in 1992, we would float these items out to those tables if they were waiting too long, because we don't want them to be unhappy. We want them to be very happy. So we'll put something on their table to satisfy them while they're waiting on the rest of their food, especially if they've been waiting a long time to get in the restaurant. And these things worked real well. There were very few scenarios back in the 90s where we were comping checks, unless something went really, really wrong. We weren't comping or buying checks, because we had a system in place to deal with that. We were floating those apples, we were floating those Dutch babies, and they were going out and they were beautiful. And the customer was so happy that, they had something to occupy their time or something to try that they never tried before while they were waiting on the rest of the food. And that works. It does. It really, really works. And I want to get back to that in 2026 and beyond. And I'm constantly talking to the management team about it, to the point where they're like, oh gosh, here he is again talking about that. Like it's something that'll never happen, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm going to make it happen. I'm getting with the owner, the new owner at the original Pancake House, talking to him about it, and he's never once denied it. The thing is, what principles are we going to put in place to make it happen? And that's what we want to do. We want to find a way to make that happen, and I'm working on it. So if you're watching this video, know that I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But it's great. It's great. The timing, everything in the kitchen was perfect. The cooler was so close by. You never had a problem running low on anything, because now in 2026, at the location we are now in Forest Drive and Forest Acres, the kitchen is all the way in the back of the house. The line is like right in the center of the whole restaurant. And then you have the refrigerator that's further back, by the back door, which means, if you really, really needed something from the cooler and it wasn't on the line, you gotta, either have someone that can get it for you, or you would have to step off the line to grab it, and that, I don't like that, The line is a lot smaller at the Forest Drive location in Columbia, South Carolina, than it was in 1992 when we were on Beltline. That kitchen was really, really nice, and I like that kitchen a lot, but yeah, timing, the timing, and the service right now to this day in 2026, they haven't quite embraced that, and what I'll do is I'll explain it to them. I'll be like, how was your training? A lot of times we hire a new server, and I'll give it a couple of weeks and ask them, how do you like it? They'll be like, oh, I like it a lot. Was there anything you see that you don't like, blah, 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 and they'll share that information, and then I'll slowly kind of ease that system and show them that system in the book, so that they know that this system really does exist, and this is just not something that I'm saying. I'm letting them know that this is something that we've gotten away from. But for the server who embraces it and starts using this technique, You know, you can be one of the better servers to work at the original Pancake House if you use this. You know what I mean? And some servers have tried it, and it can be overwhelming because that server will come back to me and be like, you know, yeah, I like it. You know, the customers aren't complaining or anything like that, but I'm constantly see myself running back and forth from the line back to my table, from the line back to my table because everything is not up. You know what I mean? And if my tables are all the way out by the front door and the kitchen is in the center of the whole restaurant, that's you know, it's a lot of running back and forth. You know, so I have to look at it from their perspective as well. You know, but at the same time, you don't want to use that as an excuse why you don't want to follow a principle that has worked for so many years. You know what I mean? A procedure, a system that was put in place not by me, but by the franchise. And, you know, it works. It has to work because it was a system that was put in place many, many years ago, you know, back when the original Pancake House was founded. And it tells you that, you know, if you go outside of these principles, if you try to change anything or try to make changes to it, then there's going to be complications behind it. And those are complications that we're dealing with right now in 2026, working at the original Pancake House, everyone, because no one follows that proven system that has worked for so long, and they have no idea what they're missing, you know. And I even talked to the previous owners of the original Pancake House, and I was like, maybe we should put something on the table to let the customers know that, you know, we want all the food to come up together, but, you know, we want your food to be hot. We want everything served. You know, we want your food to come to you as soon as it's ready. That way, you plant that seed in the customer's head, they already know, okay, everything might not come up all at one time. When that food is ready, at least you give them an incentive to be like, okay, well, at least I know my food's coming to the table hot. You know, my eggs, my pancakes, everything's gonna be nice and hot, although everything might not be here. If I got a party at 5, you know, the server might visit the table 2 or 3 times before everything is on the table. You know? But at the same time, the reason why the server doesn't want to do that was because one of the biggest complaints is they'll come and be like, well, I got 2 people eating and I got 2 people that are not eating. You know, this is where the floating of the apples and the Dutch babies come into play. And this is what I've been trying to talk to the management team about. You know what I mean? If you know you're going to be in a situation like that, the cook should automatically be floating these apples and floating these Dutch babies out to the point where they'll be sitting in the window, and you can offer something as an appetizer for the people that may not be eating. Give them something to snack on while they're waiting for their meal. You know, it's like one of my favorite restaurants that I go to, Olive Garden. You know, one of the things I like about the Olive Garden is, you know, it seems like you wait a while for your meal, but by the time the meal already comes out, I'm already, you know, half full because of all the salad and the breadsticks I've been eating. Because that's one of the first things they bring you, you know, is the salad and the breadsticks automatically. You know, that comes with whatever entree you order, you know, whatever you may order from the Olive Garden. There's always salad and breadsticks that come out, and you got something you can eat on while you're talking to your, you know, colleague or whoever you're coming to the restaurant with, you know, and I like that. You know, that's why the Olive Garden to this day is one of my favorite places to eat. But we have the same systems in place at the original Pancake House, and we use the signature items known as the apples and the Dutch babies, and it works. It works. You know, once you get the cooks trained to do that. You know, because when I was on the line in the 1990s, if I was working the 4-foot, you had 4 different stations. You had 4-foot, you had Pancake Grill, you had Meat Grill, and then you had the egg station. And if I was working the 4-foot station, which was the first station I started working, because you have to work up to eggs in that order. You start on 4-foot, and then you work on pancakes, which I couldn't wait to get there because that's what I wanted to do. And when I got to the pancakes, I kind of stayed there for a while, years even, before, but they will let you know, I mean, they give you an incentive by saying, okay, by learning every station might be worth a quarter a raise, and that gave me an incentive to move on instead of just staying on pancakes. But when I got to the pancakes, I wanted to stay there forever. That Pancake Grill, that was my favorite. That was my favorite station to work. Which later on the egg station, which was everyone's station to avoid, became my favorite station of all time. I mastered it and I got so good at it to where the Pancake Grill was my second favorite. Egg station was my favorite, and then 4-foot you know, third place for me, and then meat grill was last. I didn't like the meat grill. You know, I didn't like how, you know, frying all that bacon off and cooking all that meat. You know what I mean? You know, I didn't like how it, you know, got on my clothes and stuff. You know, I didn't care for the meat grill. So that was the, you know, it was all right. You know, it's a no-brainer station, but I didn't like that station. But yeah, lots of stories to tell you. You know, and that's just a fraction of all the adventures and all the fun that I've had working at the original Pancake House. And we'll talk more about it. You know, but wasn't that exciting? I mean, it's exciting to me to even talk about it. You know, and I'm just in the 1990s. I have so much information, so much I want to share. And we'll continue it in another video. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.